don't know.
And the first time, I thought it was.
Really?
I thought it was.
It is, yes.
It's an affordable one.
Yes, it was. What?
They say. I missed it.
I think if you find I'm sure you have some fun.
Keeps you in room.
This guy does.
Hi, you're Shane's wife. Hi, you okay? Yeah.
We certainly think, so.
He was very friendly, and that's what I'm saying. That's what yeah.
Sometimes it's 4 nights. How are you? Good. About 60,000. And build another 34,000. Oh yeah? Oh yeah? What's your name? That's your name? You know, I tried to call. I know we had it. Yeah, yeah. We don't
My name is Matt Hurd. I am a senior at Lewiston High School, and this is Maya Letourneau. She's also a senior at Lewiston High School, and we will be your co-moderators for tonight's debate. I want to give a big thank you to the Lewiston Public Library for hosting the debate tonight, as well as the Sun Journal for helping to put on the debate. tonight is for the community and you guys to get the information you need to make the right decision on election day. I will pass it on to Maya Letourneau to introduce the candidates.
So, one of tonight's candidates is Mr. Bouchard, and he is a 6th-generation Lewiston native, and him and his wife Allison have a 17-year-old son, Anthony. He's a graduate of Durigo High School, Maine, and Central Maine Community College, and he owns the Maine Home Recreation and Bouchard Lawn Care, both of which are in Lewiston. For the past 3 years, he has served on the City Council representing Ward 4. Mr. Chin came to Lewiston on a scholarship to Bates College. Although he planned on going to seminary, he quickly became involved in the community and decided to put roots down in Lewiston. He is now raising a son here with his wife, Nicola. A member of the visible community, he began his involvement in local issues in 2005 during the campaign against the so-called Heritage Initiative that would have demolished one of the 4 affordable housing units in downtown. Since then, he's worked as a community organizer at Maine People's Alliance on issues like protecting prescription drug coverage for seniors, increasing property tax assistance through the homestead exemption and property tax fairness credit, raising the minimum wage and taxing the wealthy to increase school funding.
To begin tonight's debate, we'd like to go over the format. The candidates have previously flipped a coin to decide who will go first. Ben Chin will be starting. So the opening will be Ben Chin and then Shane Bouchard. The closing will stay the same. Ben Chin and then Shane Bouchard. The timing is as follows. Each candidate will get 4 minutes for an opening statement and 3 minutes for a closing statement. Candidate number 1 will get 1 minute to respond to the question, and candidate number 2 will get 1 minute to rebut and respond to the question. Shane and Ben will alternate answering questions first. There will be a 10-second warning and then a stop sign raised where the candidates will stop. We will allow for gentle discussion if need be.
So tonight's questions were compiled from the Sun Journal reporters and readers and Lewiston High School students who gathered questions from a wide range of community groups and members. All of the questions are shuffled randomly to ensure a fair debate, and the last half hour or so will be dedicated to answering questions from live audiences and both online and in person here. Note cards and pencils will be provided near the front door, or you can raise your hand at any time and one of the LHS students will bring you a note card and pencil. Please raise your card up at any time throughout the debate for it to be collected and considered for asking. We ask that everybody silence their phones and there be no applause, cheers, signs, or posters during the debate. And please be considerate of others by not interrupting or otherwise making it difficult for people around you to hear what is being said. Tonight's event will be live streamed on sunjournal.com where it can also be viewed later.
Mr. Chin, if you would like to give your opening remarks, you will have 4 minutes. The timekeeper will stand at 30 seconds, then stand again for the remaining 10 seconds.
Thank you. Last week, I talked to a man who has voted against me 3 times already, and he said he's changing his mind this time. And that's because his family has been affected by the leading cause of death for people under 50, and that's the opioid epidemic. And people ask why I talk about it so much, and it's simply because it's important. Maine saw one of the sharpest increases in drug overdose deaths as any state in America, and Lewiston was hit particularly hard. On average, one of our neighbors dies every other week because of this epidemic. Now, there was no cure for AIDS when it started, but this disease, which last year surpassed AIDS in its magnitude, has well-documented treatment strategies that, while not perfect, are absolutely more effective than just locking people up. And in the short run, I've compiled all those approaches into what we're calling the belonging agenda. It requires the pharmaceutical companies that fraudulently claimed these drugs were not addictive to register and disclose what their salespeople say. It outlines how we can learn from other communities, like the Bath-Brunswick region, that has seen no statistically significant increase in their drug overdose deaths, because their treatment providers guarantee appointments within 48 hours. They adopted workflow systems from industrial engineers and scheduling software from hairstylists in order to increase their capacity by 400% while keeping their budgets flat. Yet in the long run, we must recognize that addiction springs from deeper causes. As my friend Claire Tammany from the Women's Center recently emphasized, addiction is a symptom of the deeper problem of trauma and despair. An epidemic, therefore, signals society-wide suffering. And that's my second reason for talking about the issue. It shines a light on the defining event of our community, the closure of the mills. The impact was not just economic. It shredded our social fabric. Whole schools and churches and shopping centers collapsed, ending a way of life. Now, depending on how you count, we're about a third of a way through this first century after the looms stopped spinning. Our dilemma is no longer the basic crisis of capital flight. It is one of faith. Either we believe that we can complete this project of restoring our city or not. More than labels of left and right, this election is about the possibility of change. The greatest betrayal of our future is not one party or the other, but despair. Addiction to the vicious cycles that prevent us from moving forward. That's why, after a decade of debating whether or not we like immigrants, it seems far more productive to align around the policies that we can all agree about, ensuring new Mainers learn English and in the workforce and become citizens. That's why, after a decade of good landlord versus bad landlord, good tenant versus bad tenant, we must put into law the rental licensing approach to code enforcement, already in the comprehensive plan that ensures everyone plays by the same set of rules. That's why, rather than support race-to-the-bottom tax breaks for big business, putting our eggs in the same failed basket, I've put out real plans with real money that encourage many small businesses to flourish. Excuse me. Beyond high-level issues, I've done my best to also take seriously the small things that make a big difference in people's lives, starting with a $250 tax rebate for seniors, then exempting homeowners from the rain tax, and creating a pilot program of free trash pickup for landlords that are doing their best. We can do this. When I look at Title 36 and see laws I helped write that give seniors property tax assistance, there's proof. Ditto in Title 26, giving 1 in 3 Lewiston workers a raise by 2020. Given in Title 20A, the school funding formula fix that brings millions of dollars into our community. It's all evidence that regular people can accomplish what the old guard once thought impossible. With all the nonsense in Washington and Augusta, action at the local level is the best way forward. That's why this election matters so much that we're having it twice. So I'm grateful to the Sun Journal, Lewiston High School, the Public Library, and all of you for another opportunity to showcase how much we care about the city and how much we can do to accomplish its full potential. Thanks for this debate tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. Mr. Bouchard, please give your opening remarks. You will have 4 minutes. The timekeeper will stand once with 30 seconds left, then stand again for the remaining 10 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming out today. I want to thank the Lewiston Public Library, the Sun Journal, and Lewiston Rocks for putting this event on, and for Matt, Maya, Aaron, and Hunter, who came out from the high school and are helping us out today. I'm running for mayor because I believe in Lewiston. I've said it a lot during this campaign. I was born here. I understand Lewiston's challenges. When I was young, I grew up on general assistance. Single mom, food stamps, Section 8, I understand, and I remember. We left when I was young, and I came back 2 days after I graduated high school. I came back to Lewiston because I knew there was opportunity for me here. In the 20 years I've been back here, I've been honored to serve on the city council, and I've been honored to build 2 great businesses here. Recently, just doubled down on Lewiston. My wife and I just signed a lease for larger space for one of those businesses in a historic mill at the intersection of our downtown business district and our inner city housing. And we did that because we believe in Lewiston. And we believe in all parts of Lewiston and all the people of Lewiston, not just one demographic, not just one area. We need to take a whole city approach if we're going to work on Lewiston's challenges. and I want to be the mayor for all of Lewiston. Lewiston does need change. We've already started down the road of change with our last city council. We worked very well together, very collaboratively. That's a change. We need change that's more than a slogan. We need change that's standing with residents on personal property rights issues. That's the kind of change we need. People, elected officials who listen to the voters that they represent. I think my record on the city council shows a willingness for change. It's not the same old, same old. I think it shows a lot of results. I have an understanding of how Lewiston city government works. I understand our challenges. I understand what our assets are and what our liabilities are. I understand things we can control and things we can't control. I understand what we can afford and what we can't afford. I hope in laying out my vision tonight that I can lay out some actionable and affordable plans that will work for the entire city of Lewiston. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bouchard.
So now for our first question. What do you see as the top 3 issues facing Lewiston as a whole? And if elected, what would you do to address these issues? And Ben, you can start.
Thanks. Ooh, okay, thank you. So top 3 issues I would say would be the opioid epidemic, immigrant integration, and housing. So real quick on the opioid epidemic, just locking people up isn't getting it done. There's more and more folks that are dying every day, and we've never locked more people up than we have right now. We need to make sure we're approaching this from a public health perspective and are making sure folks get access to treatment. Second, immigration has been one of the biggest issues that Lewiston has fought about for a really long time and made a national and international name for good and bad reasons. And I think that, people can look back on it and say that's accomplished very little for people, whether you like immigrants here or not. We need to focus on doing things that everybody can agree about, making sure people can learn English and the workforce, become citizens, the highest value of entering our country and sharing our value. And finally, housing, big issue. Hopefully we can talk about it more. I just say that this licensing program is the way everybody's going to play by the same rules, and we can move forward with rebuilding our downtown.
So I would say first thing on my list is the image of Lewiston. I believe our image has held us back for a very long time. I think there are things we may have done in city government that may have helped us gain that image. And I think there are things that are parts of that image that are completely unfair for Lewiston. And we have to sort those things out, and we have to work towards a better community for all of us. Another issue is housing. I completely agree. I think our housing stock is dated. We have a lot of issues with lead. We have landlords and tenants that seem to need to come together a little better in some cases. I think we need to help our landlords. We can't demonize our landlords. We shouldn't be calling them slumlords. And I think the third thing is taxes. The mill rate in Lewiston is out of control. Now, the last 2 years, the city council has done a great job with, if you have a homestead exemption, your taxes actually went down. But we need to continue down that path because the taxes are too high and it's anti-business.
Thank you both. So for our next question, how will you go about trying to make Lewiston a more attractable place for businesses that attract young people like Starbucks, Target, American Eagle, and others like this?
Well, I think I think I said it last time, and I think I'll put a lot of our local businesses above any of those chain stores. Now, we have some great local businesses here in Lewiston. We have some local shops here on Lisbon Street that do a great job of attracting young professionals. I think we also need to consider that we can't just work on attracting young professionals and those kind of businesses. We need all kinds of businesses. We have a lot of assets here in Lewiston. We have a ton of mill space, as I know very well. We have retail, office, industrial. We have space, and it's at half the prices of Portland space and closer to a larger percentage of the population. We have to leverage that.
Thanks. Well, if you go on the website, we've got a small business plan that's up there. And one of the big things that this centers around is taking advantage of this opportunity that doesn't come around very often, which is we've got $500,000 that's now in a revolving loan fund in the city. And that's because some of these old programs that are a decade old or more in this case have been paid back into it. And I think that one of the most important things we can do for small businesses to make sure they're attracting the kinds of retail opportunities and restaurants and things like that are, one, take a good look at all the programs that money's supposed to be going to. A lot of them are outdated. There's a lot of loopholes you have to jump through. They can be simpler, they can be streamlined, they can move more money out more quickly. Second thing is a little bit of technical thing called form-based code. Hopefully we can get in the weeds on that a little bit more, but the quick example I'd say is Bare Bones Brewery right down the street technically had some issues getting in there because of a brewery being a little bit hard to fit in our current zoning requirements. We can do a lot to reform our current zoning requirements to make it easier for businesses like that we want to attract to start.
Thank you. After the overwhelming rejection of the Lewiston-Auburn merger, what do you see as the next step regarding working with Auburn, if any? What specific areas would you like to address together? Ben.
Great. You know, economic development, when a business is thinking about coming to Lewiston, they're obviously going to think about Auburn and vice versa. So I think that there's obviously a lot we can do to make sure that we're not stepping on each other's toes there and are taking advantage of the unique things that both cities have to offer. But the second thing that I return to that we talked a little bit about at the last debate is transportation. You know, our streets don't stop right at the border, they connect. And people who rely on trains and buses and other modes of travel to get to this area, like the airport over in Auburn, are usually things that people use together. Every great city uses all these modes of transportation. There's so much that we could be doing to make sure that we integrate our economy in with the rest of the state, providing good housing and job opportunities for everybody around us, and folks who live here too. Every week now, I'm talking to somebody at the door who has been pushed out of Portland because they can't afford it, or has to commute down to Portland to work because they can't find a job here. If we had better transportation systems, we can make this work better for all of us.
So I've actually had some discussions already with Mayor-elect Levesque in Auburn. One of the first things we need to do is we need to evaluate our current boards and committees, our current joint agencies. We need to streamline those processes. We need to find out where, and we need to continue to explore where more efficiencies may exist between Lewiston and Auburn. We can't leave those stones unturned. We can be two separate communities and still work together for the common good. I believe businesses already look at us as a greater metropolitan area anyway. They're not looking at just Lewiston or just Auburn. I think the other thing we can do, and Mayor Levesque agrees, is we can go together to Augusta and work on the law surrounding consolidations. 1,000 people in each city should not be able to divide a community the way this community was divided over this election season. There needs to be a process in place whereby two communities looking to merge need to have a referendum prior and make sure that 50% of the people in the community are even interested in exploring the idea, because communities should not be torn apart by a very small group of people.
Thank you. With Lewiston's diversity and immigrant population on the increase, how do you plan on embracing the different cultures that make up Lewiston? Shane.
So, I think anybody who wants to come here and be a productive member of society and go to work, you're welcome to come here. I think we are a very diverse community. We've been a very diverse community. I'm a product 6 generations ago of immigrants. I think most of us in this room are products of immigrants. I think we have a very diverse community, and I think that community already works pretty well together. I think there are some things we can do at the local level to help with language barriers and job force training. I think Mr. Chin and I have different ideas how to get there, but I think we've both got a good handle on that.
Like many of yours, my family is an immigrant family. My grandpa came to China from China when he was 9 years old, had no money, spoke no English, and didn't have any family here. And you know, he kind of raised us to believe that the American dream really was possible, but you know, two things had to happen. He had to work really hard, and he had to get some lucky breaks along the way. And certainly, a lot of people had to look out for him to make that happen, and he raised me to believe we've got to extend the same to everybody else. You know, to be specific, particularly when you're an adult learning English for the first time, you don't learn it the same way kids do. There's a lot we can do around the adult education system to reform it to make sure that people are learning English in practical ways actually sink into their heads. And specifically that lines up with job training, because we should be targeting that education to set people up for careers that actually make themselves successful. And finally, this all gets linked to citizenship. Citizenship is where you actually pass the test, saying you understand about American history and our shared culture and values. So all that stuff to me is important in terms of making this community diverse and work.
Thank you. During your term, would you like to see Lewiston entities become more environmentally friendly, and how would you envision this being done, Ben?
So I posted, I think a couple of weeks ago, about a group of cities led by mayors that have said, okay, if the federal government is not going to take responsibility for dealing with climate change, what can we as cities actually do to tackle that? Because cities don't account for all CO2 emissions, but they do account for a lot. And what they came up with was a set of policies. Now, we talked earlier about transportation. There's absolutely an energy efficiency and climate angle to that. The cities have a major role to play. We talked earlier about zoning. Energy efficiency is a really big part of zoning. Anybody who's building anything these days knows the value and the importance of making sure that people don't have to spend a ton of money burning a bunch of oil they don't need, polluting the environment. So you can actually go, I encourage you to check out the Facebook page. There's a big report. It goes through every single thing cities can do to make sure that even just within cities, we can meet the very important things that we need to meet our energy challenges today.
So as chair of the Public Works Oversight Committee, we created a committee that was a recycling committee, which is still working. I've been following that committee quite a bit. Personally, I recycle a lot. I would say we need to do a better job of helping the folks in the inner city recycle. They're actually able to recycle now, but the program's not utilized in our inner city. And we need to do a better job of getting the information out and getting the bins out and getting the recycling collected. That's one big thing Lewiston can do. We have a great recycling facility out on River Road. They just expanded to another shift. That's great. And as far as a municipality, Lewiston's actually started to change over to LED lighting, which has saved us a ton of electricity and a ton of money for the taxpayers.
Thank you. What do you see as the city's role in the continued revitalization of the downtown area if the federal historic tax credit is lost in tax reform? Shane.
Well, I think the city will need to step up in some ways. I know we have a couple of very concerned landlords. I actually spoke with Congressman Poliquin this week regarding those historic tax credits. I know that the mayor has spoken to Senator Collins. Both have pledged that they are going to work hard and fight to continue to keep those tax credits. I know the Senate, the bill that's come out of the Senate now, going to committee, has the tax credits there. I think it would take I think it would be challenging for us to develop some of these buildings, and I think we'd lose some of them if we lost some of those tax credits. So it's definitely something we need to keep our eyes on and talk to our congressmen, no matter what party we're from, and make sure that they continue to keep those historic tax credits here.
Just to say right up front, I don't support this federal bill. This federal bill is a giant tax break for the wealthy. I mean, it's unprecedented how much money the wealthy are getting. And it comes from somewhere. It comes from all of us. It comes from projects like we're talking about that are essential for rebuilding our downtown. It comes directly from the taxes that will go up for many folks in this room in order to pay for it. I think this might be one of the differences that we have. I don't support this bill. That said, the #1 source of revenue for economic development projects the city has direct control of comes from revenue sharing from Augusta. That's also been hatcheted away at up in Augusta. It comes under attack every single budget. We need to fight to make sure that the millions of dollars that our city is owed, the perpetual cuts to that, comes back to us. This is one of these things where it's just fundamental. Either your economic development theory is about giving tax breaks to wealthy or supporting small businesses. You can't have both of us.
Thank you. With the increase of panhandling in Lewiston, as mayor, what would you like to see done about the issue in practice? Ben.
I mean, we were talking about this earlier about what are symptoms and what are root causes. I think everybody who can see Portland went through a very similar experience here, where all of a sudden about 5 or 6 years ago as housing became extremely unaffordable, panhandling went up. Where housing is more affordable and people aren't homeless, panhandling goes down. And it really is as simple and as complicated as that. There's no shortcuts here. What we need to do is we need to make sure everybody has access to quality affordable housing through things like this landlord licensing program that we've discussed. At the end of the day, we can have a politics that's about putting band-aids on things that make folks uncomfortable, or we can focus on the real issues that are driving the root cause of poverty. And I'm proud to say that, having worked to raise the minimum wage and other issues like that, we've got a track record of addressing things like that.
So I think one thing we can really do is work with some local business owners who are looking for help, whether that be skilled or unskilled, and try to do what we can as a community through nonprofit organizations, probably not through city government, and find employment where we can, find services where we can for some of these folks. I was speaking with a business owner today that said that he had no problem at all with good communication skills in hiring someone who was homeless and giving them a chance. I know a few years ago, a local landlord went to the city with a proposal to build a lodging home and start helping some of these folks, and the city wasn't very interested in that project. So I'd like to see that project come back. I'd like to see us give that an opportunity and try to work on this, because panhandlers are going to be here, but they do contribute to the image of our city, and we need to do what we can to help them.
Thank you. In regards to the current school budget, what areas do you view as a problem, if any, and what areas would you like to see funded more, if any? Shane.
Well, I think overall we could use more school funding. I think we could use more from the state. I think the state robs us of some of that funding. They're supposed to pay for 55% of education. 55% is up for debate. 55% of what? Does it cover sports? Does it cover transportation? Does it cover ELL? Does it cover, what does that cover? And there's some debate in the legislature and in the governor's office about what that covers. I'd like to see our schools fully funded. I don't believe in doing it through a referendum like we passed last year, because as we've seen with revenue sharing, the legislature's not going to give it to us. They're going to take it, they're going to use it for something else anyway. So in terms of our actual school budget, I'd like to see more money put in the classrooms and not into administration.
I was proud of the very first campaign speech I gave to launch this whole thing about talking about federal Title I funding, which there was an illegal error in how the state was administering school funding that was denying our city millions of dollars. And when we first talked about that, the awareness wasn't that high, and people kind of laughed about it and said it wasn't going to change. And lo and behold, about a year later, it had been fixed. That's money that directly provides better education for folks and puts pressure off of taxpayers locally to fund it. I will say, like Mr. Bouchard said, we've got to do more of that. I was supportive and worked hard to make sure that this referendum that passed last year did pass, and although it wasn't fully implemented, it did move more money to the schools than we've had there since the Great Recession. And I'll say more broadly, as a mayor, in terms of my philosophy on education, I have zero interest in micromanaging anything that's happening in the schools or with our hardworking teachers. We need to champion public education and make sure folks have adequate resources, not flavor-of-the-month education reforms.
Thank you. How would you represent Lewiston as a whole and not just the people who voted for you, Ben?
Good question. Well, I think the very first thing starts with how you choose to run a campaign. Do you choose to put forward issues that are just there to whip up your base and appeal to a narrow group of people, or do you try to find genuine common ground with folks? And so that's why I hope that folks check out pensionformayor.com and look up the positions that we've put out there. I think that common sense positions, like making sure everybody who owns a building downtown has to follow the same set of rules as everybody else, making sure immigrants can access English learning and become citizens and enter the workforce. I mean, these are the kind of positions that I think are places that we can find real common ground and consensus to move forward on. So at the end of the day, you can't please everybody, you can't get everybody to agree with you, but I do think it's possible to make sure that when elected, the vast majority of people in the city feel represented.
So first of all, I would point to my 3 years on the city council. I have not voted right-wing, I have not voted left-wing, I've voted with people. There's a solid track record there to be looked at that I will be here for every resident of Lewiston, not just a specific group. I'm not an employee of a hyper-partisan organization, and if we want to talk about campaigns, I knocked on every door when I went to a neighborhood. I don't care if you had a Ben Shin sign, a Mark Care sign, a piece of cardboard that said Chuck Sewell. I knocked on your door. I didn't use an app with an ideology score that only got me to doors where I knew people were going to agree with me. I talked to everybody because I want to hear from everybody. I want to hear from the people who don't agree with me. I want to hear from them just as much as I do the people who agree with me, because as your mayor, I need to represent you. I need to represent everybody in this city, not just a small group of people.
Thank you. Do you believe the Bates community and Lewiston community should interact more than they have in previous years? And if so, how do you plan to do so? Sheen?
Yes, I think the Bates community should be a bigger part of this community. I think there are a lot of opportunities for outreach with Bates. I know they have a center dedicated just to community outreach, and I think we could leverage that a lot more. I think that's all I could say. I hope we can.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, anybody who comes into Maine is struck by the fact that we have three really excellent colleges, Bates, Bowdoin, and Colby, as well as a really great public University of Maine school system and community colleges. And all of these are important, and they're actually all represented in the Lewiston and Auburn area. College for most folks is not just about getting an education. For most people, it's about entry into the middle class or a pathway to get there and to stay there. That's certainly something that Lewiston could use all the help we can get at. So the Harbor Center for Community Partnerships that Mr. Bouchard was talking about, I think is a great example of those points of collaboration. But I think, for example, it's kind of crazy that we don't sit down with the president of the college every year and say, this amazing purchasing power that comes in our community every year, how can we actually structure our city to draw down on that so that it's more than Forage and a handful of other places that students and faculty and staff end up supporting through their dollars. So I think there's many ideas out there that we can use, but I think absolutely all these institutions of higher education are a real asset.
Thank you. And I want to remind everybody in the audience that if you would like to have a question asked now, you can raise your hand, and some students will go around with some note cards and some pencils so you can submit them for consideration. Next question is, a common misunderstanding of Lewiston is that we have a high crime rate. However, according to the most recent study done by the FBI Crime Reporting Program, is that the rate is actually much lower than other cities in Maine. How do you plan to address this concern of people and or businesses looking to move to Lewiston? Ben.
Yeah, this is a really important question. I gotta say, I heard it just earlier tonight. I was knocking on someone's door, and they said they just didn't feel safe downtown. And you hear that from generations of folks that remember growing up in multi-unit buildings and playing in Kennedy Park, and how you used to be able to eat off the floor of these places because they're so clean and so well maintained. And I think the thing that's fundamentally driving these reputational issues, these myths out there about crime statistics, is not really statistics themselves. I'm kind of a firm believer that most people don't base what they think about in the world because they research a bunch of statistics on Wikipedia. It's the feeling they get when they drive around, and whether or not they see empty mill buildings and foreclosed lots, and if they see needles in playgrounds. I mean, these are real things. These are real challenges that we have, and real revitalization plans and programs like the small business loan program we talked about, the rental licensing program, all these things are what's going to be the fundamental things that change how our city feels when people walk through it. And I think when you do that, you'll find people's perceptions of the statistics end up changing too.
So this is one of those places when I spoke about Lewiston's image earlier and how there are things that are completely unfounded. This is one of them. The fact is, in 2016, we were number 31 in the state of Maine for crime. We're the second largest city, and we were 31st in crime. Auburn, Portland, and Bangor all had a higher crime rate than Lewiston. This is a myth. This is a myth that needs to be dispelled. It doesn't help that when there's a crime in Portland, you see it on the news for 30 seconds, one day, one time, and it's gone. When there's a crime in Lewiston, it's on the front page of the Sun Journal 6 times. It's on every news station, every day for 4 days. The same crime, the same report. That doesn't help us at all. So it's a myth that definitely needs to be dispelled.
Thank you. As mayor, how do you plan to keep community members better informed and engaged with city matters and community events? Shane.
Well, I think we've started down that path over the last few years. I know our community relations coordinator, Dottie, is here tonight. She does an excellent job through the city Facebook page and the city website of keeping community events up. There's a few Facebook pages now that have popped up for Lewiston people. Several, Lewiston Rocks, for an example. I think we could do more in terms of community engagement if we could put leaflets in the water bill. That's one way I think we could help with recycling. We've already got the bill going out. We've already paid the postage. Leaflets are not too expensive. I think we could make some headway there with community events. And we can also leverage Great Falls TV during city council meetings or school board meetings or even taped versions of our planning board meetings.
Well, I guess I'd say from the beginning, this is one of those issues that I think highlights just the fundamental sort of shift in perspective that I think would be good if we had a culture change around in City Hall. My experience of working local issues for a long time is that there's a lot of hardworking folks, but then particularly in the mayor's office, it's easy to get reactive. It's easy to only react to things when people have complaints about stuff and get stuck spending all your time chasing fires. So to that end, I think this issue of communication is vitally important. I remember way back in the mid-2000s when we started creating the People's Plan, where we actually went door to door, engaging neighbors. People actually just did this for a project in Maple Street a couple of weeks ago. Asking people, what do you actually want? So communication doesn't start just by telling people what's going on. It actually begins by soliciting folks' ideas. That's why the very first literature piece I dropped at the door was a survey asking folks what they liked and didn't like about the community. So there's a lot more we can do there, social media, other kind of paper outreach, but at the end of the day, I think it's about adopting a posture of listening, not just talking.
Thank you. More and more people are being forced to live a stressful lifestyle, with the city frequently raising the mill rate. Every time the mill rate changes, a household budget for food and amenities is disrupted. What would you like to see done about this issue, Ben?
This is one of the plans I'm most proud of for being able to put out there. We have state money that's coming to Lewiston next year, and it can only go for property tax reductions. And if we just lower the mill rate for every single business and household in the whole state, or in the whole city, it would go down a little bit, under $100 for the average homeowner, which is a perfectly respectable thing to do. But one of the things that I've heard most from folks, and I'm knocking on doors, is the fact that elderly people are having a hard time for this exact reason staying in their homes, because you can't just go out and get a raise or get a job when you're 85 years old, particularly when the Social Security COLA isn't going up. So these resources that are coming in, we can do a lot of things with them, but one of the things that we can definitely do is a $250 tax rebate for seniors. Again, this isn't going to be a transformative amount of money for folks, but I think it's better than the $30 or $40 they'd be getting otherwise, and hopefully it's a down payment on what we can do in the future.
So one of the best ways to lower the mill rate is to increase economic development. Actually, to increase economic development that leads to economic growth. You can do a lot of economic development that doesn't lead to anything. Part of doing that is going to be changing the image of Lewiston, bold solutions to some of our financial problems, exploring ideas like Port Authority at our airport, public-private partnership around a civic arena. Those are some things that can help reduce the mill rate. As for Mr. Chin's proposal, I have to go after this. This money that's coming to us is earmarked for education. To use it for anything other than education is illegal. Can't do it. It can only be used for education. I know there's a couple other points to Mr. Chin's plan as well. One of those points is also illegal. Can't be done. I'm sure we'll get to that one later. But this money can't be used for city-side money. This is money for the school from the Department of Education. That's the only thing it can be used for is education or to reduce the school-side tax rate.
Thank you. How would you assist our community in looking at the opioid epidemic from prevention to treatment, involving all sectors of the community and across the ages spans? Shane.
So I talked in my opener about providing actionable and affordable solutions. My ideas on opioids don't sound as grand as other people's, but I can tell you they are actually actionable, they're affordable, they can be done. First of all, we have to support all the efforts of our police department, right from our community resource officers who are on the front lines of this and keeping our police department abreast, all the way up to the chief, who I sat down and talked to, I'm the only candidate here who has sat down and talked to the police chief. We have to be supportive of the efforts of our police department. Next thing we can actually do, the opioid crisis. We give out CDBG money to nonprofits every year. We have several nonprofits who deal with this opioid epidemic, all the way from treatment to prevention to counseling. We need to make sure that that CDBG money is going to them. We need to change our CDBG formula so that they can receive more money. I'll need a little extra time here, huh? So that they can receive more money of those CDBG dollars because they're treating opioids. We need to put the emphasis on the opioids. And finally, the last thing that we can do here, and this is free, one of the priorities of our new city council needs to be examining our current zoning laws regarding where treatment facilities and dispensaries can be located. When this came out, there was a lot of fear about opioids. The restrictions are very tight on where these can be located. And we also have this new home health model that's come out to treat opioids. We had someone try to do this in an area that's across the street from 2 pharmacies, and they weren't allowed to dispense. Things like this need to be looked at by the city council. These are things city government can do, and they're free.
Are both candidates ready to move on?
I think I got an answer, yeah.
Okay.
So no, I'd like to say. If you check out the belonging agenda, and a lot of these ideas have come from rank and file police officers, so head of the police union was a guy I talked to. What the core idea here is that you have to involve every single stakeholder in the whole community. And so you can list that out. And in addition to law enforcement, it's all the service providers that Mr. Bouchard talked about, and then also every major employer that's in town, every institute of public education and higher education. Every single person has a role to play, and it's too much to get into detail right here, but the common ground is that we need to have a system where any point of entry that anybody has, whether it's one of our hospitals, whether it's a treatment provider, whether it's a cop on the beat, whether it's just somebody who's going to your work or church, we need to have a system where everybody has a little business card that has where to go for resources. And once you get to that portal, you need to be able to be seen 48 hours. We talked a little bit about how there are tricks of the trade that we can learn from other communities to make that happen. And I should say too, that Grace Street Recovery Services, right down the street in the Pepperell Mill, they just got a contract from the city of Sanford for almost $500,000 to provide all sorts of services for folks. And there's money to be raised out there from the state and federal government to make all this stuff happen. And if I could just borrow a little extra time too, I'll just say, if you're interested in the details and why the tax proposal I'm talking about isn't illegal, you can check out the website. But the short answer is, it is absolutely true what Mr. Bouchard says. The money is earmarked to lower the mill rate for education in schools. And when you hold the aggregate mill rate constant, it frees up more money in the for rebate programs like the ones that we're talking about. So happy to talk about that more in depth, but rest assured I wouldn't put anything out there that was anything but a really thoughtful plan.
Thank you. What are some good things that are happening in the city that you would like to see continue? Ben.
Well, there's almost too many to count. I'd say that one of the things that we haven't talked about tonight and didn't actually get to last time was actually the art scene in Lewiston. And this is important because, one of the things that you hear a lot about is that we want young people to stay in the city, and we want to make sure that there's a place, that everybody can have a job after they graduate, etc. And that's more than dollars and cents. Young folks that I talk to are looking to go to live music. They're looking to have art shows and concerts and that kind of thing that makes a community vibrant and fun to live in. There's a really good plan that LA Arts has put out. It's sort of a comprehensive approach to the arts over the next 5 or 6 years. It's based on surveys they did of regular folks from all different walks of life to see what would it take to really build a scene here. From the art walk that happens on the Fridays to shows like at Guthrie's that feature local artists. And it's filled with recommendations that I'd encourage everybody to check out. So arts would be the one I'd kind of hone in on for that.
So I can agree with Mr. Chin on arts. We have a vibrant art community here, and I think that needs to be leveraged more. Some other exciting things, we're acquiring the canals from Brookfield. I think that's going to be very important to the development of the downtown. I think we can beautify that area, and I think that contributes to the image of Lewiston, and we can possibly leverage the canals as an asset. We've done a lot in a lot of our parks. We've created Pettingill Park, which is a neighborhood park, something we're lacking here in Lewiston. There's been new playground equipment installed. We've restored the historic gazebo in Kennedy Park. We've worked on the Greenway. We've done a lot here in Lewiston. The Riverfront Island Master Plan is coming up. We're just restoring one of the bridges over one of the cross canals now. There's a lot of good happening down here. Look at Lower Lisbon Street here, how this looks compared to 10 years ago. It's moving slowly in the right direction.
Thank you. As mayor, what will be your top 3 priorities and how will they affect citizens' taxes?
Well, I think we go back to taxes, housing, and image. The image of Lewiston is key to our economic development. If we don't work on the image of Lewiston, businesses aren't coming here. People are not coming here. If we don't work on our single-family neighborhoods and get people here to raise our median income up from $37,000, businesses aren't coming here with a median income of $37,000. And that's going to start in single-family neighborhoods. That's going to start by improving our downtown housing stock, pulling in market rate rents. Those things should all help grow our tax base, which should reduce the burden of taxes for everybody.
So I talked a little bit earlier about opioids and immigration. So let me hone in a little bit more on housing here. And the way this rental licensing program works is that every single unit of rental housing in the city would be inspected. And we're not talking about little things. I mean, probably my house isn't up to code if you looked at it close enough. We're talking about the major health and safety issues that are the difference between something being a safe place to live in or not. Once you do that, in other cities that have made this happen, about 50% of the housing passes without any problem. The rest of the 50% you kind of like hone in on more successive, and you spend more and more time on code enforcement with a few bad apples that sort of are the reputational destroying few that destroy the reputation of the rest. Now, the way this connects to economic development is once you know that there's a level playing field, it's much easier to justify investing in Lewiston. It's a much more attractive community to come and live. And that creates the purchasing power and the capital that we need to leverage for these long-term economic development projects that we've been talking about.
Thank you. Some may view the position of mayor as more or less a symbolic role. Do you agree or disagree with this statement? And with that, what do you believe your biggest responsibility is as mayor, and what will you do with it, Ben?
It's a true statement, and so I think it all comes down to what do you believe is the power of symbols. So yes, the mayor gets to vote to break a tie, the mayor gets to make committee appointments. These are all very important functions, facilitating meetings, etc. But I think one of the reasons why all of us are here tonight is the fact that setting a vision matters. You know, if you're a city councilor and you're casting a vote and you got 800-900 people to vote for you in the last election, that's considered doing pretty well. The mayor is the only person who goes out and gets thousands and thousands of people to either support their vision or not. When you're in the room, you've got to have the juice to twist some arms and put some bold ideas forward. And the only way that you can do that is if you lead a citywide conversation about our future and where we want to go. So that's what I've been out here working on doing. It's what I think our city needs to move forward. We can't keep having the same arguments. We can't keep electing the same folks. We need to find a way to have new ideas to move forward.
I agree with a lot of what Mr. Chin just said. We do need new ideas, and I think I've provided some in my 3 years on the council. I've outlined quite a few more in this campaign. I think one of the jobs of the mayor is to champion for Lewiston, to highlight Lewiston's assets. That's a big part of the mayor's role. We also, to bring proposals. Mr. Chin and I both have a lot of them. A lot of them are bold and new. To challenge the city council, no matter what ideology that council may fall in, to explore these proposals, to give them the vetting that they deserve. I think the most important job of the mayor of Lewiston is to be our advocate in Augusta, to go to the legislature as the mayor of Lewiston, to bring the superintendent, the city administrator, whatever the issue may be, bring people with you, bring counselors into the fold, and advocate for Lewiston's position. Advocate for some of that revenue sharing that legislature after legislature has continued to steal from us. Advocate for things like the Title I funding that Mayor McDonald went several times before Mr. Chin mentioned Title I funding and advocated to have stripped out of the formula. Those are the kinds of things the mayor of Lewiston can do.
Thank you. Will you seek out members who you know have different views than yours and your supporters? And if so, how will you do and show that you are doing so? Shane.
Well, absolutely. I think a big way to do that, again, I knocked on every door. I want the divergent opinions. I want everybody's opinion. And the first thing I said at everybody's door is, do you have any concerns about the city of Lewiston? It was always a question. It's not about me, it's about what you believe. That's the first question I ask at the doors. I've already talked to Mr. Chin. There's a place for Mr. Chin with the Mayor Bouchard. There's a place for everyone who ran for mayor, people who ran for council. It's not just about my ideology or my opinion. We need to work together through divergent ideologies. And I think I've displayed that as a city councilor, and I will continue to do that as mayor.
Yeah, you know, I think this goes back to adopting that posture of listening that we talked about. I'll say there's a couple, earlier I didn't get to talk about the kind of operational nitty-gritty of some of the ways that we can do that. So, you know, I mentioned one, which is the survey, which Democrats, Republicans, Independents have all filled out. I found that particularly when reaching out to older voters, pen and paper is the best old-fashioned way to make sure that you're soliciting people's feedback. There's a lot of folks that don't have email and don't have computers, and you know, reading the newspaper, getting a letter in the mail, replying it back, that's the way to do that. So believe me, I've gotten some pretty long letters from people who agree with very little from what I'm saying, and my wife Nicola can testify that I try to reply to every single one that I get. For the younger crowd, I think social media is probably most important. It's kind of interesting how we're diverging that way. In addition to checking email, you know, I've had to adopt this practice of spending almost an hour every day checking Facebook. All the mentions and the likes and the shares and the comments and all that. It's a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but I do think it's an unprecedented medium to make sure that you're really putting ideas out there and soliciting them back. So, you know, I think the in-person stuff is important, pen and paper, and then also making sure we're using all the digital platforms at our disposal as well.
Thank you. How do you feel about grading our students on a proficiency scale, and what are your concerns for the initiative, and what do you view as the bright side? Ben.
This would be one of the flavor of the month education reforms that I was referring to earlier. And again, in principle, I have nothing against the idea that proficiency-based learning or any of these other, I don't know if you want to call them innovations that are out there, might have some value to add. But I think it's pretty clear that if you look at the workload that teachers have, if you look at the workload parents have, just being parents having kids, we can't keep jerking people around from new ideas to another new idea every single year. I also reject the idea that the problem with our schools is that somehow, after generations and generations of people being able to learn how to read and write and do math, that suddenly we don't know how to do it anymore. I think the fundamental reason why we have challenges in our schools, it's no accident. Rich schools, kids are doing pretty well. Poor schools, people are struggling. And until we build an economy that works for everybody, that asks the wealthy to contribute their fair share so that everybody has a good education, we're not going to be getting at the fundamental problem. So let's do that instead of flavor of the month education reforms.
I would agree on PBL as a flavor of the month education reform. I would also say that the mayor's role in education largely is to keep his hands out of it, to support the superintendent, to support the school board when things are needed from our legislature in Augusta, like funding. Those are things that the mayor can do. As far as micromanaging the individual policies of a school superintendent and a school board, that's well above and beyond what either of us should be thinking about doing for the city of Lewiston. They pay professionals for that, and we vote for school boards to determine that. So.
Thank you. What is one thing you see another city or town doing that you would like to see Lewiston reasonably do? Shane.
Well, so I go back to my idea for a public-private partnership revolving around a civic arena. We have tons of land at Exit 80 that isn't quite developable for retail business, but following the lead of a community like Bangor, which has done the Waterfront Concert Series, brought some incredible acts to Bangor, brought a lot of revenue into that city, and really spurred economic development in that area. And it's been because of that outdoor concert venue and that incredible civic arena they have there. I think we have an opportunity here in Lewiston to turn Exit 80 into a destination, not a drive-by exit. And that's really something we need to focus on. I think this is an idea that it's been proven. It works in Portland. It's worked in Bangor. I think it's something that we have the capability of doing, and it at least deserves to be vetted fully.
Well, one of the ideas that we've talked about is on the welfare side of things. And this is an idea that I actually believe folks on the right and the left can agree on, and hopefully is an example of this theme of listening to people who disagree with you to try to find some common ground. It's maybe unusual for a progressive to be talking about a welfare reform plan when running for office. But other cities are doing this, and basically we've been calling it the Rebuild Lewiston Job Corps. It's very simple. If you have an ability to work, so accepting seniors, accepting people with disabilities and extraordinary childcare needs, what we do is instead of just giving people cash assistance, we line people up with job programs they're actually creating things like they did in the New Deal, like dams and roads and bridges and planting trees. And today we can think about cooking meals for seniors and helping small businesses shovel snow and all these things of public value that people, we could be building together to get real work done in our community. At the end of it, folks would have something to put on their resume, a few more skills, as well as income support. So I think this is a very common sense idea. It certainly would help with integration of folks, and it's just another thing that we can borrow from other cities to move ours forward.
Thank you. What municipal department do you think we could find savings by making more efficient, Ben?
So I think this goes a little bit into the line between micromanaging and not that Mr. Bouchard was referencing earlier. I don't envy the council's task of having to go line by line to the entire budget, looking at how much money was spent on screwdrivers in every single department. Personally, when I take a step back and look at the big picture of our budget, I see that there have been extraordinary position cuts across the board in every single department, to the extent where the city staff that I talk to are genuinely concerned about morale, because the job that took 3 people a couple of years ago is now being done by 1 person. Now that's not to say that there aren't reasonable efficiencies and cuts that you can sort of find, but I think the premise of that question kind of always circles back to this idea that somehow you can slash spending in these city departments and find meaningful property tax savings. And that's just not an idea that's true, and it's not one that would support. I want to focus on the big picture of raising resources, actually raising morale so that people have the resources they need to do to get the job done for our city.
So over the last several years, we've worked really hard as a city to restore a lot of the positions that were cut. We've restored code enforcement. We've restored a position and a half in the fire inspector's job. We've added 4 firefighters this year, many others as well. So we're actually working towards fully staffing a lot of our departments and getting back to pre-recession staff levels. Again, as Mr. Chin said, micromanaging is difficult. I've gone through this city budget 3 times. It's very hard to find significant savings, but there are places we can look and we can do better. Some of our enterprise accounts, I think we can make more efficient. Water, sewer, stormwater. I believe there's still some work we can do at our solid waste facility to reduce our public works budget. I believe we can move the pool from the recreation budget to the general fund and stop depleting the recreation budget's fund balance every year by $25,000. So there are some places we can look, and there are some efficiencies that can be found.
Thank you. New Mainers represent 25% of the city's population, but that percent is not reflected in elected, appointed, or hired positions citywide. How would you, as mayor, work towards bringing more new mayors into those positions to better match the city's immigrant population? Shane?
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to education and training. I think we can do a better job as a community when new Mainers arrive at helping them with the culture of America, of Lewiston, of integration. I think we can do better with education, trying to get some of these folks job ready, give them some skills to go to work. I think we have to do a lot better with English language learning through all ages. As Mr. Chin said, it's difficult as an adult. It's not the same as a child. But we need to do better with all of those things to bring more people into the fabric of this community. I believe this year we had 2 new Mainers seeking office this year, so it's good to see them out there. We've had a school board member previously, so I think we've started in that direction, and I think as more become citizens and have that path to citizenship and home ownership, more will be empowered to seek the offices. And I welcome anybody. We had 4 city council races this year, uncontested. I welcome anybody who wants to put their name on a ballot, despite wherever you may be from, having the opportunity to do that.
So I view this question as a little bit different than the broader questions about integration opportunities for the community at large, because I think the disconnect here is that there are actually plenty of leaders in the immigrant community, in the New Maynard community, who own businesses, who speak English very, very well, perhaps better than I do, who are owning buildings, who are doing a ton to revitalize the community. And I think that there's a sense, which I think is pretty accurate, that if you're paying a lot in property taxes, if your kids are in the schools, you should be able to see yourself represented in the people who are out there. And again, this comes back to that posture that I was talking about. It's like, instead of just waiting for folks to come to us, we got to do a little bit more outreach to go to them. With all the small business owners that I've talked to, just a block from here, I don't know the last time that they remember, the mayor stopping by and saying hi and asking how they're doing. I mean, that's just basic neighborliness. Maybe there's one here that did it previously. But I think that on this particular issue, the issue isn't who knows English and who doesn't. The issue is really like, are we willing to do our part in reaching out and meeting people halfway?
Thank you. Could each candidate say one positive thing about their opponent? Ben.
I'm glad I get to hear what Mr. Bouchard says. One of the things that has meant the most to me about this campaign so far, and this refers to earlier, we sort of had a hot dog handshake at Simona's a couple weeks ago. And I really think this campaign, even more than last, has been much more substantive, much more about the issues. There's been a lot less silliness out there, and hopefully that continues here in the final stretch. And I give Mr. Bouchard a lot of credit for that. It's pretty easy when you're running for office to take cheap shots at people. And even tonight, I think you can see that. We disagreed on a couple of things, but nobody's out here because you like waking up in the morning and insulting the neighbor that you live a couple of blocks down the street from. Like, the only reason why you go out knocking on doors in the cold and the dark, as it is perpetually right now in May and December, is because you really care about the community. That's something I really believe Mr. Bouchard is, and I just applaud the way he's carried himself and elevated the debate this year.
Thank you, Ben. As Mr. Chin said, we had a little lunch at Simone's a couple days after the general election, and I got home, my wife said, "What do you guys talk about?" I don't know. We talked about religion, we talked about kids and family, and a little bit about politics, and no arguing whatsoever. It was really great, it was cordial, it was just, I think I described it to someone recently as just two guys talking. I think that's what it was. Mr. Chin has a big heart. I think he truly cares about a lot of people. And he's very principled, he's very passionate. You know where he stands, and I do appreciate that in a political foe. It's not like finding that green frog in your lawn. It's, you know where he stands all the time, so I appreciate that he sticks to his guns.
Thank you. We will begin asking questions from the live audiences online and in person. So again, as a reminder, you can raise your hand at any time to get a note card from one of the LHS students. And when you have the question, you can raise the note card again to be collected and considered for asking. So for the next question, when knocking on doors in the community, what issues have been brought to your attention? Shane.
Well, one of the big issues as I was knocking on doors previously was the merger. The merger was a giant issue here in Lewiston. We hear a lot about taxes. Taxes are another big issue, and economic development. When are we getting an Olive Garden? People want economic development. They want economic growth. They don't want to have to leave Lewiston to eat and to shop. Those are some of the highlights of what came to me so far doing tours.
Very, very similar. I think that one of the things I've heard so much from, particularly in older generation folks, are stories of spending whole Saturday afternoons walking up and down Lisbon Street and shopping and get some clothing for Easter Sunday coming up, or maybe stopping by a bar and hearing live music, and just what a cultural scene there really was downtown. And when folks look at the very first mill that you see when you're coming across the river as still an abandoned property that just doesn't represent our city well, people are pretty dispirited about that. So I think that there's a way to think about economic development where we're always looking for the next big thing, just kind of drop out of the sky and hopefully we give a big tax break and it solves all of our problems. Or there's a way of doing the hard work of supporting local small businesses. And in particular, one of the things that's up on the website is supporting local retailers. If you think about this stretch of Lisbon Street, a couple blocks that way and a couple blocks this way, if we had just 2 or 3 retailers here, maybe a women's clothing store, it would just do a tremendous amount to drive traffic downtown and make sure that we're doing everything we can to support local people as they develop our city.
Thank you. In light of recent events, what will you do to help end the political polarization?
Ooh, all right, this is a top issue, so I'm trying to think about new things to say here. We've been talking a lot so far tonight about dialogue and the ways that you can reach out to people, whether it's seniors visiting with the nursing homes and having handwritten letters, or making sure you're pretty active on social media, and then actually developing principled ideas that respond to the best of those concerns. I think another key thing in adopting this listening posture that for me has been a lesson just knocking on doors and trying to do this and model it, has basically been needing to really just actually listen to the pain in people's lives and where they're really coming from. I found that a lot of folks, when you kind of peel back a lot of the anger that's driving the political polarization, what's underneath all of that is feeling like nobody who is ever an elected official or ever had a position of prominence has ever reached out and taken their concerns seriously. So I think that that's the number one thing, that kind of outreach where we're not out there with all the answers, we're out there to actually listen and show people the compassion of simply our presence. I mean, that to me is a thing that at the end of the day is going to lower people's blood pressure low enough so we can actually listen and try to get some things done.
Yeah, local government isn't about right, left. Local government is about people. It's about standing with people. My record on the city council is very clear. When the people come out, I listen. And I stand with people on property rights issues, zoning issues. That's what we're here for. We deal far more with potholes than we do politics in local government. And that's a fact. I think part of it is taking a whole city approach, not just advocating to one crowd or another or one ideology, not to demonize people. We can't be calling them landlords slumlords. We can't be calling people racist. We need to be out there for the entire community at large.
Thank you. When speaking of Lewiston's image, how would you describe it? Shane.
Well, I have the opportunity, one of my companies, we sell game rooms and we work all over the state and all over New England, so we hear it. People hear that we're from Lewiston and they back up a little bit sometimes. They're very thrown off by Lewiston, like the entire city is just a ghetto. Because that's the image that's out there, and I find myself defending Lewiston several times a week. I think it's a false image. That's not what Lewiston is, and I know that. Everybody in this room knows that because we live here and we love the city and we care enough to come out on a Monday night and watch Ben and I go at it for an hour and a half. So we definitely care about this community, and it's a great community, and most of that image is completely false. We talked about the crime statistics earlier. It's unfounded, but it's not a great image away from here, and that's unfortunately the reality, and it's a huge barrier to our economic development and our success here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the only thing I would add is that one of the opportunities that somebody who does some economic development recently pointed out to me is that there's a reputation that Lewiston has within Maine, and there's a reputation that Lewiston has more broadly outside of Maine. And the interesting insight that this person had, that was kind of pitching me on what Lewiston can do to attract actually a little bit more tourism, is that it is absolutely true that if you're in Maine, you've heard the stuff about the dirty loo and all these other disparaging things that people say about us. But if you're not from Maine, very few people have heard that about us necessarily. And so I think that there's a little bit of an opportunity that we have in sort of how that reputation sort of splits out. Where, we talked a little bit about the canals, we talked some about, just the great advantages that we have being on the river, and, how with the river being far less polluted now than it was, we've got a lot of opportunity to actually restructure our images around the waterfront, around a lot of things that people would come all over to do. I really like running and biking and swimming, and I really like the fact that I can, go on really rural roads and be in beautiful land to ride my bike on, and to be out in the woods, and then come in downtown and have a bite to eat, and then go to a quiet suburban home at the end of the day. That's a very attractive thing that we actually have, in some ways, a blank slate to attract other people outside of Maine here too.
Thank you. Name a leader, past or present, whose leadership has inspired you. Ben.
Does it say if they're in Lewiston or could be anywhere?
Up to you.
Okay, wow, big choices. Well, I guess maybe this reveals a little bit too much about my personality, but I didn't agree with everything that he did, but Teddy Roosevelt to me stands out as a guy who did some really interesting things to just try to get results and get things done. A quick Teddy Roosevelt story would be when he sort of came up as a police commissioner of New York. And this is a time when there was a lot of machine politics and corruption in New York City. And cops were sort of out just sort of taking bribes and not doing what they're supposed to do. And as a police commissioner, he just would show up where he knew police officers were supposed to be and see what they were doing in the middle of the night sometimes. And so he basically, modeled as a leader. If you want to get something done, you don't just kind of delegate that out and tell other people to do it. You get out there and you do it yourself and you get your hands dirty. And so that kind of attitude, that willingness to be out there on the street, that's what I try to model. Talking to voters in the campaign, and if I get in, it's time to roll up the sleeves and try to make some things happen.
I won't bore you with a 10-minute William McKinley biography, so I'll take it a little closer to home. And I don't agree with everything, but I would have to say Governor LePage. Governor LePage, while I don't always agree with him, he's not afraid to speak his mind. He is not afraid to put his opinion out there and to be heard, win or lose. And again, I don't always agree with it, but I can respect someone, as I said earlier about Mr. Chin. I don't agree with much of what he says in terms of politically, but I can totally respect the ability to put yourself out there and to take hard positions and to fight for those hard positions. And I would have to give the governor props for that.
Thank you. How as you, as mayor, how would you support the local and growing arts community in Lewiston?
Well, I think we have to have larger conversations around the arts community. I think we need to work on bringing more people here to Lewiston. We have art walks monthly, I believe, downtown. I think we can do a lot more in terms of, we talked earlier about how do you get community events out to people. I think we can do more there with the art walks. I think we can spread that news outside of Lewiston. I think we could even take some city money or some LA Arts money or money that we give to them, use it for advertising out of town and really try to boost that community. We have a great art community. People come from all over to, down to Lisbon Street for these art walks and to explore this art community. So it's an asset that Lewiston has, and it's an asset that we're not leveraging nearly enough, and we need to do a much better job at it.
We talked a little bit about this earlier, Cultural Plan LA. It's chock full of very specific ideas on what we can do to advance these interests here. And I'd say, I'm really proud to be supported by a lot of local artists. Folks might know Greg Boardman, who actually runs a weekly concert out at my church, Trinity Jubilee Center, that has brought in performers from all over, and it's in the middle of a Wednesday. So one thing we do to support the arts is just rep some programs. So shout out for noon on Wednesday. There's usually concerts that happen, and it's a great 30 minutes to take out of your workday to support really fantastic music that's happening here. Talk a little bit about people like Jim Parakilis, who's also a supporter of mine. He's a wonderful pianist that teaches at Bates and has done a lot to bring in all sorts of people and actually chair LA Arts and guide it through a lot of strategic planning process. The other thing I'd say too is, filmmaker Craig Saddlemeyer, happy to kind of support her, the LA Film Festival. I mean, lots of good things have happened over the years. And I think it's about really actually valuing the arts and seeing them as just as important to our economic development as the sort of more dollars and cents programs that we usually talk about in that space.
I add something? I would add too that just tonight while we're here, the school committee is approving the architectural firm that's going to be adding the new Performing Arts Center to the high school, which will focus on arts, music, and performing arts. So that's another asset that we will be able to leverage here in Lewiston really soon, based on their votes tonight.
Thank you. One of the mayor's responsibilities will be to fill any vacancies in committees, boards, and should a council or school committee seat become vacant, how will you handle these nominations? Ben.
Yeah, we got this question last time, and I'd say very similar approach here. So in the same way that I think a mayor should not be in the business of micromanagement, I'd say that also goes to some extent for school committee members as well. Obviously, the school committee has a more direct role in terms of setting the overall policy and structures and curriculum decisions around how schools go. But at the same time, I think that there needs to be a light touch approach to that. When I talk to people who are on the front lines in our public schools every day, they are, just to give one example, I had a teacher who, for various reasons, their kid's curriculum wasn't going to line up with being able to do a physical for sports, and the deadline was coming up and it was too quick. And they approached an administrator, and that administrator took 5-10 minutes to make a couple calls and make an exception for that kid. That bowled this teacher over. They never felt so appreciated. And when I'm looking for leaders to fill spots in the school committee or other positions, that's the kind of leadership style that I'm looking to replicate.
I think we have a lot of people in this community with a desire to serve. I think in terms of general boards and committees, we take applications and we review the applications. I think just in knocking on doors, I've met a lot of people with great skill sets who may be interested and just didn't know how to apply. Those are people that we can go back to and ask if they're interested in putting an application in. We don't usually get a ton of applications for a lot of these boards and committees, and that's a shame. We should be swimming in them in this community of this size. And it's about picking the people with the right skill sets to serve on these committees, despite any ideology or background. As far as the school committee seat that's open, this is something I've taken very seriously. I've had talks with several current school board members and school board elect members to see if they know anybody who may have the skills and the desire and the ability to serve in that role. I've talked to some people who were not victorious on the 12th, and there's some interest there as well, so hopefully we'll be able to find someone really good for that Ward 6 school committee seat. It should be the first appointment that either of us have to deal with.
Thank you. For our last question, how would you, as mayor, specifically celebrate Lewiston's successes, including but not limited to the several high school state championships? Shane.
Well, I think we need to do a better job, actually, with state championship teams and recognizing them in council. I know we do it. I know sometimes it takes a while to get them in. I know we still haven't seen the boys soccer team yet. I know some of that's scheduling, but we need to do a much better job of recognizing our sports teams and even any academic decathletes or any individual honors in our high school or anything bestowed on a community member. Or I think we have to do a much better job in City Hall of recognizing our city employees, whether they be firefighters, police, public works folks. We need to do a much better job of recognizing them for going above and beyond accomplishments or even years of service. I don't think we do that enough in city government. It's something we need to do more of.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that, yeah, definitely congrats to the boys state soccer champs and all the other state championship teams that we're really lucky to have. I think, to me, what I kind of hear in that question is a little bit of a theory on how we start to push back on some of the reputational issues that we have. I think that there's this idea that Lewiston doesn't have a lot of accomplishments to point to, and I think we're right in saying that when we do things and do them really well, we can become to be known as a town for excellence. So I think internally, totally agree with all the things that we should do. You know, when you're a scholar athlete managing, all the homework and all the practices and all that, you absolutely should be recognized throughout your community. But I think that, I think maybe the thread that's being suggested here in that question is that there's more that we can do externally to make sure that Lewiston is known as a place that does this. I don't know if folks went to the screening of the documentary of the boys soccer team the last time they won, but I thought that was an excellent example. I mean, we can be doing those kind of things that actually give us a national platform and tell really interesting stories about a town that's faced hard times and has come together, overcome a lot of odds, and maintained excellence and got a lot of things done. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Mr. Chin, please give your closing remarks. You will have 3 minutes. The timekeeper will stand once with 30 seconds left, then stand again with the remaining 10 seconds.
Great. I really want to thank everybody tonight for being here and for participating in this campaign. And I'd like to close with a little bit of thought that I hope connects some of the big threads that we've seen here tonight between this definite yearning that we picked up in a lot of questions for a more civil discourse, a little bit more unity, a little bit more about the issues, a little bit less the sort of political drama that we've associated with politics, sort of above the local level, and sometimes, unfortunately, here. And also something that I think squarely addresses how we can move forward as a community, both on the economic development side, and as well as education and some of the arts things that we've talked about as well. And that's with a little bit of research that's just come out of Baltimore. And it's about this thing called, the importance of folks having what's called an identity project. And what this study basically did was it looked at kids who grew up in some really tough places in Baltimore, hundreds of them, and followed them over the course of their entire lives, from childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. And they asked them all sorts of questions about what they did with their life, and tried to figure out what was the difference between a kid who made it and a kid who didn't. And what they found was, contrary to a lot of popular beliefs, it wasn't really about work ethic, because the vast majority of these kids had just phenomenal work ethics. It wasn't even really about whether or not they lived in public housing or not, or integrated housing or not, because most of the kids actually had to move around so much. They end up living in a lot of different situations. What they found was that the kid needed to have what they called an identity project. And so an example of that would just be, it could be a small thing as, one of these girls, before her dad actually left her family, gave her a video camera. And she used that every day in her adolescence to just video record herself, sharing her thoughts, sharing her feelings, a little bit of an art project, kind of like the things we were talking about earlier. And that sparked for her a lifelong passion for that kind of visual media. And she would always talk about how it fell back on hard times and how it got her through what she needed to do. And eventually, yes, it helped lead to a career. But the point was, you have to have something worth living for, more than just dollars and cents, more than just the immediate hardships and sufferings that are right in front of your face. And we're certainly a town that's had our fair share of those. And we've talked about that, from the opioid epidemic to immigration to housing. And I think the key question that we have going forward, again, is not one of dollars and cents, although that is important. It is one of spirit, it is one of attitude, it is one of faith. It is whether or not we believe that we can chart our own destiny. Are we the kind of people who can build a city where everybody has what they need and everybody contributes what they can and nobody is left behind, or not? I think that the things that make that possible are these things like the identity projects. There's things that, when I go out indoors and I ask people, why do you stay in Lewiston? It actually for most people isn't jobs. It actually for most people isn't, the specific programs that the city does or doesn't put on. It's family and friends. It's relationships. It's the people who we love. These are the things that define us as a community. They're the reasons why we're here. There's a reason why I have tremendous hope for our future. So it's been a great opportunity being with all of you. Thank you so much to everybody who put on the event tonight, and look forward to continue to work with you no matter what.
Thanks, Ben. And thank you all for coming again. Thank you for allowing me to come up here and share my ideas for Lewiston. We need to elect a mayor who understands city government. We need to elect a mayor who understands what our assets are and what our limitations are. We need a mayor with a strong understanding of how this city works. I think if you look at our plans on the Facebook page, I think you'll see that my years on the council have given me a lot of that great insight. I think you'll see that my record shows that I'll be a mayor for all of Lewiston, and that believe in Lewiston is not just a tagline for me. It's how I've lived. It's a fact. We shouldn't be making it more expensive for landlords to do business by fining them or charging them fees. We shouldn't be demonizing people. We should be working together as a community to make Lewiston better. And some of it is about dollars and cents. It is about tax base and tax revenue, and we need to work in those directions. So I look forward to the opportunity to be your next mayor, and I'll ask for your vote on December 12th, and thank you all for coming out here.
Last few words are said. I want to thank the Sun Journal and the Lewiston Public Library for helping put on tonight's debate. They put in a lot of hard work to help tonight come together smoothly. Don't forget, tonight's debate will be archived on thesunjournal.com for later viewing. I also want to thank our co-moderator, Maya Letourneau, who helped plan the format and develop questions for tonight, in addition to 2 other Lewiston High School students, Hunter Landry and Aaron LaChance. We hope this debate was informative and will help you make a decision in the upcoming vote on December 12th at Longland Elementary School. Thank you.